This is I-24 News, and I'm Natasha Kirchuk. Thank you for joining us. Well, after 21 hours behind closed doors in Pakistan, no deal has been made. The first direct talks between the U.S. and Iran in more than a decade have ended in a stalemate, with both sides walking away and the clock on a fragile ceasefire still ticking. Well, U.S. negotiators left Islamabad overnight after what was supposed to be a breakthrough moment. Instead, the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says Iran has refused to commit to giving up the ability to build a nuclear weapon, calling that a clear red line for Washington. And now U.S. President Donald Trump has just taken to Truth Social, saying bluntly that the only issue that mattered, which was the nuclear issue, was not resolved, and announcing that the U.S. Navy is going to begin the process of blockading all ships in and out of the Strait of Hormuz, accusing Tehran of world extortion for failing to reopen the critical waterway. Meanwhile, the IDF chief of staff has now ordered the military into heightened readiness, putting forces on immediate alert for a possible return to conflict with Iran. According to military sources, the army is now operating under a structured pre-war framework, similar to what we saw ahead of previous strikes, accelerating operational planning, shortening response times, and expanding its target bank inside Iran, especially focusing on missile systems and launch sites. At the same time, the Israeli Air Force is now preparing updated strike packages while air defense systems are being reinforced across the country, with growing concern about a potential multi-front escalation. But it is important to stress this. No decision has actually been made to launch a military operation, but the message is certainly clear. Israel is preparing for all scenarios as the diplomatic window appears to be narrowing fast. And I'd like to turn now to our guests in the studio. We have Yaki Dayan with us, former Israeli consul in Los Angeles, our senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran with us, and our security analyst Yaakov Lapid. So I'm going to turn to you, Yaakov, first to kind of talk about what we're hearing in terms of Israel's readiness for renewed conflict. What would that actually look like, and how likely or how soon do you think this is to take place?
So first of all, just to clarify that the fact that we're hearing statements about readiness tells us nothing about what's actually going to happen. I think it's important for the viewers to understand that.
Right.
It's the military's job to be ready for all contingencies. And the most obvious contingency that they have to be ready for is the possibility of renewed conflict. What would that look like? It would look very similar operationally to what we've seen over the past 5 weeks. What would change would be the target bank. Instead of the previous targets that we were seeing, the missile program, which probably there's still some targets left to hit there, and their command and control. The target bank would very likely involve core economic infrastructure that's tied into this regime's military capabilities. A whole host of very sensitive strategic economic targets that we've heard a lot about from President Trump in the lead up to the ceasefire. So I think that that's what they're preparing for. But again, I'm stressing this has nothing to do with what may actually happen. It's the military doing its job and being ready for any order that may come.
Right. Of course, though, we're hearing reports after reports, at least people on the ground, wondering whether or not the ceasefire is about to dissipate, especially given the fact that Trump has said that the U.S. Navy is now going to begin blockading the Strait of Hormuz effective immediately. No ships are going to be allowed in and out. What will that mean in terms of the response that we could see from Iran?
So that's a great option by Trump, by the way, because there is no big appetite in the United States to renew the war. So this is actually an option in between. It's a blockade, something that happened in Venezuela, but even in a better way, because you'll have two aircraft carriers, one blockading each side in Hormuz. And Trump would say, if, my ships are not going through, no one would go through. Now, what he said that he managed to create some kind of a NATO coalition of ships that will escort some of the ships in the Hormuz, in the Strait of Hormuz. Plus, you have to add to that the United States has brought two mine ships to take out the mines from the Strait of Hormuz, and they are starting to operate now. Now, the question is if the Iranians would dare to attack those ships.
Right.
Because if they dare to attack those ships, then war would resume immediately. If not, they will take out the mines, and we'll see slowly resume of ships that are going. But nevertheless, this blockade can actually suffocate Iran economically. And they are already in a huge problem. And doing that for enough time, that could definitely bring down the regime.
Now, we saw that the Iranian media just put out a video, essentially, of the IRGC Navy warning a U.S. destroyer, basically, to turn back from the Strait of Hormuz. I want to talk about the strength that the Islamic Republic and its military forces have at this point. Obviously, we saw a sustained military campaign from both the United States and Israel that lasted for over a month. Do they have the capability of stopping the U.S. from actually doing this in the Strait of Hormuz?
Stopping, not necessarily, but impeding, that is indeed an option. Look, ultimately, Iran maintains attack capabilities on the Strait of Hormuz, not necessarily from a robust navy, which no longer exists, or a few ships exist, but the strait travels alongside the southern coast of Iran. Simply geographically, it has a massive advantage, and it has prepared for this moment with numerous launch sites aimed at the strait. It also has the mines that no one knows where they are, but these mines have established a route that would push current shipping through closer to Iranian territory. Ultimately, though, we have to look at what the Iranian response to this would be. What the likely response would be, if Iran is limited in exporting its oil, it will exact that same cost on its neighbors. And so what it will do is it will go after the various pipelines that the UAE, Saudi Arabia has in order to circumvent the Strait of Hormuz. It might continue attacking those countries proper because it has identified that as the underbelly of Trump's military effort against Iran by going after Gulf countries that is exacting a higher cost than what Iran can exact by attacking American military assets. And they've done it. They've done it until now, and I think they have no problem with escalating that, completely disregarding the fact that geographically they're going to have to live with these countries moving forward, but they have abandoned that way of thinking. And so when we look at the potential efficacy of such a step, it does have military potential, but we also have to look at the cost that Iran will try and exact on its neighbors, and that is something that I would imagine is being discussed not only in the White House, but also among the Gulf nations. All
right. We're going to have to turn now to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim, who is joining us from the White House. Mike, obviously, we have all been closely reading, you could say, the latest post that Trump made on Truth Social, but now he's also conducted a phone interview with Fox News. What is the latest in terms of the rhetoric that we're hearing from the White House and the American administration?
President Trump is insistent that the Iranians not only will come back to the table, but give the United States everything it's asking for. Listen, we understand, and I think the president understands, that's not going to happen. He's talking tough right now. That's might be what's needed from certain quarters here, but we understand that this negotiation likely will continue. I think the American side wants it to continue, even if they're talking tough, and even if J.D. Vance said at the end of the Pakistan talks that the offer that was put on the table was the last and best offer. Even from the Iranian side, we heard from the Iranian president referred to, quote unquote, this round of negotiations, which happened in Islamabad, inferring that they're open, or there could be another round of negotiations coming up here. Both sides, in the end, as the Omani foreign minister put out on Twitter a short time ago, both sides are going to have to make what he called painful concessions to move forward here. But in the meantime, as I said last hour, the operation that Trump wants to move forward with here is a way to split the difference between just going to another round of talks, which may prove to be as fruitless as the first round, and going back to a full-scale war, which is going after the Strait of Hormuz, making sure that Iran does not have the advantage of selectively and preferentially letting in whoever they want and keeping out everybody else. If there's going to be a blockade, make it be on American terms. try to incorporate other coalition allies, potentially the UAE and others, and make sure that the Americans are controlling the narrative and controlling the military situation and not the Iranians. And that appears to be what Trump wants to do here with setting up a blockade of his own of the Strait of Hormuz going forward.
Right. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for joining us so much, Mike. We're going to be turning now to Eric Mandel, founder and director of the Middle East Political Information Network. He's joining us from the United States as well. So very much mixed messaging, you could say, in terms of what Trump is planning next when it comes to negotiations with the Islamic Republic of Iran, and also whether or not there's going to be a return to military activity. At this point, what are the ultimate stated goals of the United States, and does the American public feel that those goals have been reached?
So, as everybody has said, we really don't know what's going to happen next. I understand that Witkoff and Kushner, unlike Vance, are still in Pakistan. At least I heard one report. My guess is Iran will re-engage because Iran's strategy still doesn't have to change. They know time is on their side. They know America is getting every day, one day closer to the War Powers Act that the president will actually have to engage in Congress to ask for money between 60 and 90 days. So I think the questions that we need to ask ourselves right now is, one, Iran has won in changing the conversation. It's all about the Straits of Hormuz. And so nuclear is still, obviously, the president says, I want there not to be enrichment. I want there to be no statement that they want nuclear weapons. I don't know why we care about a statement, because they have made that statement. They've claimed fatwas from the supreme leader. Statements mean absolutely nothing. The question really here is, did America's good faith efforts in going to Pakistan change the Gulf nations, the Asian nations, the European nations to actually join, unlike what the UK Prime Minister said, we're going to wait until everything's done before we engage. And the question here about a blockade is, the question we should ask is, why did we not stop Iranian oil before going to to India and to China? So at this point, I think don't overread what people are saying. I listened to the president's statements just a short time ago. A lot of it is, as Mike alluded to, some of it is things he just says and for an effect. But we really don't know what's going on next. And again, how does this all play with Israel? Israel doesn't even have a seat at the table in Islamabad, which is something else that Israel should really care about, despite the fact that it has no relations with Pakistan.
Right. Obviously, we're now hearing reports that Israel is readying for going back to war, essentially, with Iran, which would suggest that because of this stall, you could say, in negotiations between the U.S. and Iran, there is going to be no choice but to go back to, some type of military approach here. We're also seeing a report now from the Wall Street Journal that says more than 60% of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' naval fleet that was tasked with patrolling the Strait of Hormuz is still intact. So, again, this brings me to the next question, which is, does the U.S. fully understand, in your opinion, the ideology of the Islamic Republic and how far this republic is willing to go to assume its own goals?
So you hit something that I think is very important, and it's something that I've written about and spoken about. I don't believe our negotiating team, as sophisticated as they are, realizes that dealing with radical jihadists of the 12ish Shia variety who have a martyrdom culture and who cannot be negotiated to a place we want to be eventually, short of regime change. I don't think they truly understand that they are different than any other actor. I think they believe that all actors respond upon the same type of motivations, and the Iranians don't. They're willing to outweigh to have American fatigue, forever wars, American elections, all these other things. They know that's playing to them. And the Iranians, no matter what happens to them, their goal is first to survive. If they survive, again, they think in decades, centuries. We think in days, weeks, months, if we're lucky. And so they know they can wait us out. So I think our negotiating team needs to somehow realign after so many negotiations, maybe learn from the failed JCPOA, that we can be manipulated. Iran wins negotiations. They may not win wars, but that's what really wins the end of the day.
Right. Well, Eric, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us with your insight. We're going to be turning now to Israel's northern front as Israeli and Lebanese diplomats prepare for peace talks. The reality on the ground is heading in the opposite direction. At least 11 people have been reported dead in Israeli strikes across southern Lebanon as fighting between the IDF and Hezbollah intensifies, with what Lebanese media is describing as fierce clashes in the key stronghold of Bint Jabil. Israeli forces are now surrounding that town. They're pushing deeper into remaining neighborhoods as part of an effort to dismantle Hezbollah infrastructure, while at the same time, the IDF says it's targeting active threats, including a rocket launcher that was primed to fire. Meanwhile, we're still seeing Hezbollah fire rockets and drones towards Israel, keeping tensions high on both sides of the border. I'd like to turn to our correspondent, Balib Sladin, for more on this. You are still in the north of the country. What is the latest in terms of sirens? And also, what do we know about preparations for ongoing negotiations, or for negotiations that are set to begin, between Lebanon and Israel?
Yes, well, the last siren was heard in the Golan in Katsrin about an hour ago. That ended without any casualties or damage or rocket attack toward that area. And throughout the day, it has been more or less the same sirens all over the upper and the western Galilee, including the lower Galilee, also a barrage of 10 rockets that aimed at Carmiel, one of the biggest cities also in the lower Galilee. They did not succeed in actually causing any damage or any casualties. But the reality is, of course, very difficult for the residents of the north, especially those that are closer to the border, with continuous sirens throughout the day. Now, on the other hand, regarding the negotiations, we see that this has, first of all, its own influence on the internal politics in Lebanon, with many are now concerned of, quote unquote, a civil war inside Lebanon. Hezbollah is, of course, not happy with any direct negotiations between the Lebanese and the Israelis, and that's why we are seeing continuous protest demonstrations in central Beirut, in other areas, calling the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Nawaf Salam, Zionist. That's what they are calling him. And because of this, according to a report today from MTV, a Lebanese media, a newspaper, saying that Nawaf Salam postponed his visit to Washington. He was set to meet with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, but he canceled this visit or postponed it because he was fearing that at some point rumors are going to be starting in Lebanon that he met with an actual Israeli official. That's something that is still very, very, at least in Lebanon, seeing it as a betrayal or a treason. So that's why he decided, at least for now, to stop his trip and not visit Washington. Either way, we're saying that this is absolutely going to be challenging for Lebanon in general, because on one hand, Hezbollah does not want to disarm, so this will not actually stop the Israeli attacks. But also, Hezbollah does not want the Lebanese government to normalize relations with Israel or even negotiate with Israel, meaning that Hezbollah is planning for one thing. His strategic aim is to stop the Israeli attacks on one hand, keep his arm on the other hand, meaning going back to the 6th of October to prior, or actually the 7th of October when they started their attacks. So this is a strategic goal for Hezbollah. And currently inside Lebanon, the discussion is very, very dangerous, let's call it, between those that are actually in favor of negotiations with Israel and those who are against it, the Hezbollah supporters.
All right. Thank you, Balir, for joining us. We're going to be turning to something a bit lighter in a region that's defined by conflict. Here's a rare moment of connection that is centuries old. Just days before Israel and Lebanon are set to hold direct peace talks, a flame lit in Jerusalem has made its way to Beirut. We are talking about the Holy Fire. That is a flame from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is believed by many Orthodox Christians to emerge from Jesus' tomb ahead of Easter. This year, after the ceremony in Jerusalem's Old City, that fire was flown out of Israel all the way to Cyprus, and then from there carried by a Lebanese army helicopter straight to the presidential palace in Beirut. And the timing here is certainly hard to ignore, because this is happening, like we just said, just as the two countries, still technically enemies, are preparing to sit down for talks in Washington, D.C. We're going to turn now to Gaza. While the fighting may have paused, the negotiations are far from over. A Hamas delegation is in Cairo today for high-stakes talks with Egyptian mediators as tensions grow over what the group claims are Israeli violations of the Gaza ceasefire. According to Hamas officials, they're pushing for a full implementation of the agreement, including the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, the reopening of border crossings, and a significant increase in humanitarian aid entering the territory. And they're also expected to raise a bigger political demand, the entry of a U.S.-backed governing body of Palestinian technocrats to take over administration inside Gaza. At the same time, Hamas is meeting with other Palestinian factions, signaling that this is not just about the ceasefire, but about what comes next for Gaza's future. And all of this, while the terror group refuses to disarm, which was, of course, the primary basis for Israel agreeing to the ceasefire in the first place. I'd like to turn back to our guests in the studio on this. I want to turn, first to Yaki, just in terms of how significant these negotiations are, or these conversations are, you could say, that are happening in Cairo.
Not really. I mean, the fact is that stage 2 of Trump's 20 points has to dismantle Hamas, and this is not happening. And not only that this is not happening, but this force that was supposed to be created and other things that were supposed to be created in order to move to phase 2 are not happening. So basically, those talks are some kind of talks between the Egyptians and the Hamas. But nevertheless, Israel is holding till the yellow line in Gaza, and Hamas is holding the other side. And I think eventually it will be up to Israel if they are resuming the war and making sure that Hamas is being disarmed and Gaza is being dismantled, because otherwise I don't see any progress being made. And it's kind of the egg and chicken, because the Hamas is saying Israel has to withdraw, but this is not up to the 20 points of Trump, because the 20 points of Trump are saying specifically Hamas has to be disarmed, and this is not happening. So either Israel would accept the status quo and will stay on this line, or resuming the war in their conditions.
All right, I want to turn to you, Yaakov, just to kind of get a sense of what has been taking place throughout this ongoing war with Iran, because obviously the focus, especially the media focus, has shifted. We're not seeing much coverage of what is taking place in the Gaza Strip. How focused is the Israeli army on tackling Hamas, given the fact that this is a group that is clearly unwilling to disarm at this point?
Well, as you say, there hasn't been much coverage, but that doesn't mean that nothing's been happening. Pretty much on a daily basis, we've been getting updates from IDF Southern Command about military operations in the Gaza Strip. So what's been happening? Just a quick refresher. We know that Gaza is basically divided in half. The IDF has operational control over approximately 50% of the Strip. And on the western side of the Strip, we have Hamas, the enclave that survives. Now, on an almost daily basis, IDF has been targeting Hamas terror cells that have attempted to cross the yellow line, testing the IDF. They're being taken out. They're being detected and taken out. And there have been a number of very interesting eliminations of senior terrorists of both Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, weapons providers, people who took part on October 7th massacres, have been eliminated in recent days. At the end of the day, where the IDF has control, it has basically destroyed most of the terror infrastructure already there. That's tunnels, that's booby-trapped buildings. And in southern Gaza, we've seen total flattening of the areas of Rafah that are under Israeli control in order to be able to create what they describe as the new Rafah. The hope is to bring in Gaza civilians to this new area that won't be under Hamas control. And under the Hamas part of the Strip, we're seeing exactly the opposite. We're seeing Hamas deepen its control. We're seeing it recruit new terrorists. These are young people with zero combat experience and pretty much zero training. They get given a Kalashnikov, a payroll, maybe an RPG launcher, and they're basically given an area to cover. So this is what's happening. Hamas is not able to import large amounts of weapons. It's struggling with that. It can barely import anything.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's refusing to disarm. This is totally predictable. Anybody that thought that Hamas would disarm doesn't still understand what Hamas is. And I think we have a countdown. We have a countdown to the next confrontation. What will it look like? There are a number of options going forward.
Right. I want to turn to you right now, Ariel, and kind of get your take on what this means just for regional relations. The lack of focus on Gaza, the complete focus on Iran, it's shifted. We're seeing Gulf Arab states pretty much align with the United States and Israel in terms of wanting Iran to fall, although, of course, they're not necessarily publicly making those statements. But, still the Gaza issue remains. And what does that mean ultimately for the future of relations between Israel and the Gulf?
The public positions haven't changed as far as the Saudis are concerned. They, as was the price before October 6th, they want to see a viable path towards Palestinian statehood. That is, any Saudi official that you speak to, they'll say that was the cost before October 7th, and this remains the cost now. And so it is clear that there can be no pathway towards Palestinian statehood as long as Hamas remains armed. And so they also need to get involved in that, but they're not. We did see in the inauguration session of Trump's Board of Peace that various Gulf countries decided to donate large sums of money to the Board of Peace, but that is for political purposes, not for actually engaging in the dismantlement of Hamas.
Okay.
This right here is confidence in a bottle.
It makes me feel so much more confident than I've ever felt.
They are some of the hottest videos on social media. Those videos claiming to instantly get rid of bags under your eyes. Annette Figueroa is here to tell us why she says this one is for real.
This one is for real, and I'm so excited. We even have a video, and all he uses is a small amount on a clean, dry face. And what it does is it tightens and lifts the appearance of bags underneath your eyes. And I did this to my father. We were at home, so we applied it to his under eye bags, and let me tell you, we were so excited. In under 10 minutes, they visibly disappeared from view, and now it is literally part of both of our daily routines. And not only does it work on the bags, it works on the appearance of crow's feet, fine lines, and wrinkles.
At our $14.95 price, it's the best way to try Plexiderm and see it work after your first application. Call the number on your screen.
Call 800-598-5843.
The crisis inside Ukraine has reached a catastrophic level, with the elderly Jews pushed to the very limit.
Go inside. She's freezing cold. There's no electricity, no heat, no water. Winter is now a weapon of war, used against the elderly, the mothers, and the young children.
They've been lined up here for hours. These are precious people who are hungry, and they have nothing. If someone doesn't do something soon, a humanitarian disaster is coming. So many Jewish people who are just waiting for someone to care enough to pick up the phone.
Fears are growing that without an emergency, full-scale response, thousands will die this winter.
The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews needs your $25 gift now to help rush a winter survival food box of emergency food for elderly Jews and families in Ukraine. Time is critical. Please give now.
They felt the shaking of missiles. These are people who have already endured so much suffering and disaster.
The fellowship has been here and across the former Soviet Union for decades, but the need has never been more urgent.
Taking out power, taking out water, simple water to drink. We're talking about the difference between life or death. Christian, Jew, standing shoulder to shoulder, saying, we're here to heal, we're here to help.
Your gift of only $25 helps rush a winter survival food box filled with life-saving emergency food for elderly Jews and families in Ukraine who are struggling daily to stay warm and fed. Please call or go online while there is still time.
My name is Eli Sharabi, and I lost my wife, Lian, And I believe my wife and daughters would be proud to see their names connected to a place that brings healing to others.
And we are back on I-24 News. Thanks for sticking with us. We're turning now to Europe. Sex tapes, corruption, and a potential political earthquake. Hungarians are heading to the polls, and as the polls are suggesting, it could be the end of Viktor Orban's second spell as prime minister, a position he's held since 2010. And it's not just Hungarians who will pay attention to the outcome. The whole world is watching, and Joe Brown explains why.
It's a record turnout, the results of which could reach far further than Budapest. Incumbent Prime Minister Viktor Orban is facing his first major challenge since he took office for the second time 16 years ago. And if the polls are anything to go by, it's not looking good for his Fidesz party.
I'm here to win. I am here to win.
He's up against Peter Magyar, a former Fidesz politician, whose Tisza party was comfortably ahead in the polls in recent months.
We know for sure that if this election takes place calmly and legally, then this election will be won by Tisza and Hungary.
Magyar has proven popular by visiting areas and people that feel disenfranchised after 16 years of Orban's rule, with critics saying that he has overseen corruption, stifled opposition media, and weakened the Hungarian judiciary. Magyar's campaign has been focused on domestic issues, such as healthcare and the economy. Orban, on the other hand, has appealed to existential problems. He has been critical of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, claiming that he is bringing Europe to war. Hungary is by far the least sympathetic to the Ukrainians in the European Union. Using its veto power to block a $105 billion loan to Kiev. Fidesz posters have been plastered around cities and towns, likening Magyar to Zelensky, with words such as danger and let's stop them accompanying these pictures. Orban has maintained closer ties to Moscow amid heavy reliance on Russian gas and energy. And, breaking the precedent of not interfering with democratic elections, several leading figures in the Trump administration, including the president himself, have posted messages of support for Orban in recent months, with Vice President J.D. Vance even speaking at an Orban rally last week in Budapest. The American right wing, specifically the MAGA movement, view Orban's social and fiscal policies as a blueprint for the success of conservatism. Israeli government politicians have also come out in support of Orban, including Diaspora Affairs Minister Amichai Shikli, who claimed that Budapest is one of the safest European capital cities for Jews due to Hungary's strong anti-migrant policies and pro-Israel rhetoric. Hungary is the only country other than the US that Benjamin Netanyahu has visited since his International Criminal Court arrest warrant. Some incidents in the campaign have been controversial. Magyar claimed that Fidesz and his former girlfriend had teamed together to blackmail him over a sex tape. And there is also a fear that Orban will, in Trumpian fashion, not concede the election if he loses.
I am here to win. And what if you lose? I like to win, yeah.
But the result, which may take some time to be finalised due to voting protocols from citizens abroad, will be closely monitored by the East, the West, and the blurred area in the middle.
Well, let's turn back to Yaki Dayan, former Israeli consul in Los Angeles, joining us. Yaki, if Orban were to lose after 16 years in power, what would that mean for Europe as a whole?
Listen, for Europe, it would be a great success because many times the support of Hungary to Russia and the fact that it blocked many decisions that have to be taken unanimously by the European Union were blocked by Hungary. So that would mean a huge victory for the European Union. I would say that this is not the case for Israel or for the Americans or for Russia as well. Because for Israel, in many cases, when the European Union wanted to sanction Israel, and they needed not only a majority, but they needed a unanimous vote to sanction Israel, Hungary was the vote against that were voting against that. And for the Americans, we just saw the VP, we just saw J.D. Vance coming to Hungary and saying this is the Western civilization, this is the front. So supporting Orban. So I think the EU would be very happy. I think that the Israeli government, the American government, and Russia as well would be less happy if Orban loses.
Right. I mean, I just, quickly, what the U.S. seems to be saying they're going to support whatever government ends up coming into play, whether that's Orban or, of course, his opponent right now. But ultimately, what do you think that would look like?
So listen, his opponent actually is a friend of Israel. The only fear in Israel is that, for example, if the EU would pressure him, he would prefer to go with the EU rather than stand against the entire EU as Orban was standing against the entire EU. But I have no doubt that Israel and the US and others would support his opponent if he wins. Right. I have no doubt that this is the case. It would be much harder for Israel in the decisions within the EU, but he would gain Israel's support, I have no doubt.
All right, Yaki, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us in the studio. We're turning now to Spain. Israel has summoned Spain's envoy after a giant effigy of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was blown up during a local festival in an event known as the Burning of Judas, where public figures are sometimes used as symbolic targets. But this year, Israeli officials say it crossed a line, pointing to what they call anti-Semitic hatred on display and directly blaming the rhetoric of Spain's government. The effigy, which is more than 20 feet tall and packed with explosives, was detonated in front of cheering crowds in a town near Malaga as part of this decades-old tradition. Spanish officials are rejecting accusations of incitement. They're insisting that they oppose all forms of hate. But let's bring in journalist Graham Keeley from Madrid to break down what is happening here. Obviously, we are seeing what you could say is a deterioration of relations between not only Spain and Israel, but also Spain and the United States amidst the war with Iran. Help us understand the context here and, how unusual it is to use a figure like Netanyahu in an event like this.
I'm sorry, I can't hear anything.
Can you hear me now? Can Graham hear us?
Yes, I can, yes.
Okay, great. So what I just asked you was essentially, to kind of break down the context here. Obviously, we're seeing, worsening relations right now between Spain, between Israel, even the U.S. amidst the war. This burning of Judas tradition. How unusual is it to use a figure like Netanyahu?
I think the context is this. This is a tradition in this particular town, which has gone on since the 1940s. In which the people choose a figure which represents, in their opinion, evil or bad things. So every year they choose a different figure. Last year, for instance, it was Donald Trump. Previously, it's been Vladimir Putin and many other figures. So it's their local opinion, and it's very much something which is of El Burgo, the village or the town in question. I wouldn't say it has anything to do with the policy of the Spanish government at all.
How is this being received inside Spain? I mean, obviously, you could say this doesn't have something to do, at least the Spanish government wasn't involved in this specific cultural event. But obviously, Pedro Sanchez is, very, very critical of the state of Israel, very critical of this war with Iran, even going as so far to not allow the United States to use Spanish bases for military activity. So, are we seeing basically the Spanish public align with Pedro Sanchez in all of these statements?
A series of polls have said that the Spanish people approve of Sanchez's stance, basically criticizing Israel, criticizing the US on the war in Iran, and previously Israel's war in Gaza. So absolutely, the tide of opinion has been pretty anti-Israel. I would say at the same time, there are also elements in Spanish society, perhaps the Conservative People's Party, who take a different line, and they are very pro-Israel. At the moment, a poll out today found that the People's Party are online to win the general election next year. So it's a mixture, although I would stress that Sanchez's policies have proved popular.
Very interesting. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us, Graham, from Madrid with that breakdown. We're going to turn now to Turkey. Israeli leaders are lashing out at Turkish President Erdogan after reports that prosecutors in Turkey are seeking to jail dozens of senior Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, for what they claim are crimes tied to the war in Gaza. The response from Jerusalem, well, it has been explosive. Netanyahu is accusing Erdogan of massacring Kurds and aligning with Iran's proxies, and Defense Minister Israel Katz is even calling him a paper tiger. Well, Turkey has fired back as well, with its foreign ministry comparing Netanyahu to Hitler. In an official statement, I want to bring in Dr. Hayetan Cohen to break this down for us. Obviously, we have been seeing deteriorating relations between Turkey and Israel for years on end now. But how seriously should we take these legal moves that are coming from Erdogan?
Well, first of all, I would like to underline that this is something symbolic. At the end, Turkey's judiciary's jurisdictional powers are limited within the boundaries of Turkey. But in my opinion, what is more important here, it's not only the indictment, but rather it is the Turkey's desire to conduct a delegitimization campaign against the state of Israel. And obviously, this judicial decision is only only a tool in this, bigger picture. We are seeing that Turkey is doing this in a very systematical manner. Turkey is conducting a very, systematic delegitimization campaign. We have to look at the statements of the Turkish officials. They are giving lots of different nicknames to Israeli Prime Minister and for the State of Israel, like genocidal gang and etc., etc. And therefore, I think this should be condemned. And obviously, this is not contributing for the future of the relations. We are seeing that this is contributing for the further deterioration of the relations. And obviously, if we also have to speak about the indictment itself, it's not the only Israeli very senior officials. There are some Israeli journalists, an Israeli rabbi. I mean,
that
this
actually
is very weird.
Very
weird.
I wanted to get to that, Dr. Yanrochuk. Of course, obviously, we're seeing a list of different, you could say, Israeli figures that would be arrested, essentially, if they landed in Turkey. We know that Turkey has been a major travel destination for Israelis for years now. Of course, that seems to be changing.
Yeah.
Do you believe, according to polls, what do we understand about the Turkish public and how they view Israel at this point?
Well, unfortunately, after October the 7th, only a couple of days, they spoke about the Israeli victimhood. But later, after, maybe like 3 days, 4 days, the Turkish press put its focus solely on the Palestinian angles. Mm-hmm. And they, unfortunately, began to conduct a defamation campaign against the state of Israel. And this, in the beginning of our program, I spoke about this delegitimization.
Right.
And it's not solely conducted by the pro-Erdogan press. It's also a common denominator between the anti-Erdogan and the pro-Erdogan camp. And therefore, let me criticize Israel's defense minister with this opportunity. He's also tagging some oppositional figures as if these oppositional figures may agree with him. In case of Israel, unfortunately, we can definitely say that also the pro-Erdogan and anti-Erdogan camp, both of these camps' consensus is unfortunately Israel critique. And
is there any future of relations going back to what they once were between Israel and Turkey, or do you think the situation has deteriorated to the point that there's no turning back now?
Well, look, I wish I could speak in a more optimistic manner, but I'm conducting, very analytical research about this deterioration, and I see a steady deterioration in the relationship, mm-hmm. and I don't see that it's improving. And given the fact that also, some very important figures like the Israeli chief of staff, he's above the partisan, he's not affiliated with the Likud party or with the Labour Party. Okay, he's someone that above politics. Even such a figure, when he is accused of conducting a genocide, I understand that the Turkish side is not interested in normalizing relations, even if we will see a government change here in Israel. So I'm very pessimistic. I really hope, and I would like to emphasize this, I really hope that I'm wrong, and we'll see a brighter future for the Israeli-Turkish relationship, because at the end of the day, these two countries have never declared hostilities against each other. So, destroying things are very easy, but building trust is very complicated. And nowadays, we are seeing that we are seeing this deterioration in the relationship. Let's hope that, common sense will prevail.
All right. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us, Doctor. We're turning now to the pit, the nerve center of Israel's war. American and Israeli officers are working side by side, sharing secrets, targets, and split-second decisions in a level of cooperation both sides say has never existed before. Let's take a look.
They control the information that passes from the IDF to the American military. They are among the first to receive it when it makes its way back. For 40 days, they sat in the pit in the IDF headquarters, the beating heart of the decision-making in the war, and were responsible for the extraordinary connection between the two armies and the cooperation level between Israel and the United States.
תדמיינו שאנחנו ממש יושבים יחד בחדרים משותפים וקובעים את התהליכים המבצעיים בצורה הכי אינטימית שיש. כשאתה מגיע לרמה אינטימית כזאת שאתה כבר מכיר, אנחנו קוראים לו השותף, את השותף. אני יודע עליו הכל, הוא יודע כמה ילדים יש לי, אני יודע כמה ילדים יש לו. וזה ממש מבוסס על אמון אישי.
רק הענף שלי פרוס ב7 אתרים שונים ברחבי ישראל, ואגף המודיעין פרוס בכ5 אתרים בארצות הברית. גם במרבית המקומות בישראל אנחנו יושבים כתף לכתף לצד שותפינו האמריקאים.
נציגים אמריקאים יושבים בחמ"לים?
נציגים אמריקאים יושבים איתנו, לומדים את השפה שלנו, ליטרלי, גם על הצד שמשעשע בזה, אבל גם בהיבט המקצועי, מבינים איך אנחנו חושבים, איך אנחנו עובדים.
האמון בינינו גבוה. אנחנו חולקים בנק מטרות משותף, והתוכניות הצבאיות שלנו מסונכרנות ומתואמות.
כל צד מביא את המטרות שיש לו, את בנק המטרות שלו, שמים אותם בבריכה משותפת, ומממשים את זה. יכול להיות, אגב, שמחר, מחרתיים, אתמול או שלשום, האמריקאים תקפו מטרות ישראליות וגם להפך. כי ברגע שזה נמצא באותה בריכה, אנחנו כבר מסתכלים על זה בתמונה אחרת. מטוס אמריקאי, חג מעל שמי איראן, אתם מזהים חולת נ"מ לצורך העניין. יש דברים כאלה, כאילו ברמה המיידית.
כן, איומים אוויריים הם באחריות של למדן. אנחנו יושבים יחד איתם, כתף לכתף, ואנחנו יודעים מי מעביר איזה מידע ובאיזה שיטות שאנחנו בנינו יחד טרם המלחמה. כשיש אינדיקציה כזאת, מכל מקור שלא יהיה, אנחנו יודעים להפוך אותה להתראה לשותף בתוך שניות.
רבים את זה לפעמים? אני רוצה את המטרה. מתווכחים במובן הטוב של המילה, במקום של רגע, חדוות עשייה. המשחק הוא מן הסתם משחק של מידע, נכון? באירוע שלכם, לאן ואיך זורם המידע. מה בפועל העבודה?
כן. התשובה היא הכל, זה רוחב היריעה של השת"פ. אנחנו מתעסקים בשיח מחקרי הכי גבוה של מה חושבים המנהיגים באיראן. אנחנו מתעסקים במטרות, יחד עם השותף, שזה אומר להבין קודם כל את השפה השונה של כל אחד מדבר בשפה שונה. אנחנו חולקים ידע, תשתיות ידע, שיטות, ובשורה התחתונה מטרות, ועד force protection, הגנת הכוחות. אני חושב שרוב מוחלט של המודיעין שמסייע לאמריקאי להגן על כוחותיו, מקורו בישראל.
על מה המנהיגים בטרן חושבים?
זו שאלה, אולי שאלת השאלות. אני מעריך שהאיראנים לא מבינים מה עומק הפגיעה בהם. לא קרוב אפילו. אני לא בטוח שזה בהכרח דבר רע.
But the story of the war, the connection between the two armies and the people in the shared room can perhaps be told through the story of the missing navigator and what happened then in the nerve center of the war during the dramatic hours when American soldiers were maneuvering on Iranian soil.
אולי 72 השעות הכי מתוחות שהיו לי בחמ"ל המשותף, שבאמת נשמתנו נעתקה על הזמן הזה. וכשאני אומר אנחנו, אני מתכוון גם קציני וחיילי צה"ל שישבו שם וגם קציני וחיילי צבא ארצות הברית שיושבים איתנו ביחד. יש דיווחים שרצים לשני הצדדים על זה שיש פה מטוס שנפגע, ויש פה עכשיו עבודה של צה"ל בלראות איך הוא יכול לתרום למאמץ הזה. הם מתקשרים אליכם באיזשהו מקום ואומרים כאילו, חבר'ה, זה מה שקרה, אנחנו כאילו תראו מה אתם יכולים לסייע, או שהטלפון דווקא מגיע מהצד שלנו? היוזמה כמובן הייתה בעצם מהצד שלנו ברצון להראות שאנחנו יודעים לתת או לעזור ולסייע איפה שניתן, והייתה התנפלות בכל מה שאפשר לעשות. הרוח הייתה, נא תעזרו,
בכל מה שניתן לעשות.
אירוע הטייס והענבת הנוטשים בשטח איראן, גם באירוע הזה אנחנו לקחנו את המערכת שיש לנו, שמאפשרת לנו בעצם לתת לשותף מידע שיגן על כוחותיו. זה לא דבר טכני או קל, זה מתחיל מהאיסוף וההבנה של מצבו וההבנה של המצב האיראני במרחב. כל הדברים האלה נדרש היה להכווין איסוף, זה לא דבר פשוט, כי אתה תמיד נמצא בחיכוך בין הרצון לתת כמה שיותר מידע, כמה שיותר מהר, לבין הצורך לשמור על המקורות שלך, ותפקידנו לוודא שהדבר הזה פוגש את הצורך של השותף.
הרגע שהצליחו לחלץ אותו היה אולי הרגע הכי מרגש במערכה עד כה, שאנחנו כולנו יושבים בחמ"ל ומסתכלים על המסכים, ומקבלים את הדיווח מהכוחות שיש להם את הנווט והוא בדרך חזרה לקרקע בטוחה. זה היה פרץ של אמוציות מדהים, היו שם גם דמעות, ירדה לכולנו אבן גדולה מאוד מהלב, וזה היה רגע מרגש בצורה בלתי רגילה.
It wasn't always like this. A shared target bank, sharing secret intelligence materials, and American refueling planes feeding Israeli fighter jets at high altitudes. The beginning goes back several years.
מערכת היחסים האמריקאים היא לא נוצרה ביום אחד. לא קמנו יום אחד בשאגת הארי והכל קרה. זה שנים של תרגילים משותפים, תוכניות משותפות.
מדינת ישראל לפני 5-6 שנים, בספטמבר 21, עשה תהליך מטורף בהובלת השותף האמריקאי, ובעצם האחריות הוא עברה מפיקוד יוקום, European Command, בצירוף היסטורי לחתימה להסכמי אברהם, לאחריות פיקוד סנטקום, Central Command, האמונים על מדינות המזרח התיכון. המעבר הזה הביא להזדמנות שבעצם את התוצאות אנחנו רואים היום.
אתה נכנס לתפקיד, כן? וביום הראשון כבר עושה טלפון לנציג חייל אמריקאי בעצם?
יותר מזה, אני כבר במהלך החפיפה, נפגש בעצם עם גורמי העבודה המקבילים שלי, ממש טס ופוגש אותם.
אני ברמה אישית זכיתי ללוות את התהליך הזה. אותו אדמירל קופר שאנחנו מכירים היטב היום בתפקידו הנוכחי כמפקד סנטקום. באופן אישי חיברתי אותו לשיחה הראשונה עם גורם ישראלי, עם מפקד חיל הים דאז.
מספרים לאמריקאים הכל? האמריקאים מספרים לנו הכל?
התשובה לשתי השאלות היא אבסולוטית לא. אבל כמות הדוגמאות שיש לי למקומות שבהם אנחנו או הם נזהרים מלדבר עליהם, היא הצטמצמה מאוד.
מה היה ההבדל בין התכנון לבין הביצוע?
יפתיע אותך לשמוע, אבל שהוא יצאה כמעט בצורה מדויקת כמו שניהלנו אותו יחד. כמו שתרחשנו את זה וכמו שדמיינו אחרי המון הכנות מקדימות.
אתה מדבר עם הבחור שלך, אתה אומר לו, ג'ו, we did it, כאילו, יש שיחה כזאת של כאילו, של התרגשות ביחד, של חוויה משותפת ביחד?
ברור. יש שני רגעים מכוננים שאני זוכר. אחד זה ה-28 בפברואר, בשעה 8:02, שזה בעצם השין של המבצע, ומדברים על זה ואומרים, התחלנו, אנחנו רצים על זה ביחד.
אחרי המטס פתיחה, מתקשרים או עולים בשיחה הזאת, בווידאו, ועל מה מדברים? כאילו, מה השיחה הראשונה? מה המילים הראשונות שיוצאות מהפה?
אני חושב שגודל האירועים הוא כזה שאי אפשר שלא להיות מוכה תדהמה ולהגיד אחד לשני, אתה מאמין, הגענו לרגע הזה. זה התרחיש הכי טוב שיכולתי והחלתי לדמיין מבחינת המוכנות שהגענו איתה. וידעתי שהמערכה הזאת, לא משנה איך נדמיין אותה, היא תיראה בפועל אחרת ממה שאנחנו נדמיין, כי אלה דברים שהם היסטוריים, הם לא קרו אף פעם.
בגלל האמון שנבנה לפני זה, אתה פשוט רואה חיוך משותף, אתה רואה שאתה מסתכל לו בעיניים דרך המסך, אתה רואה שאנחנו מבינים אחד את השני, ושמכאן ואילך אנחנו עוזרים בכל מה שצריך, גם בנקודות השפל וגם בנקודות החזקות ביותר שיש.
In the army, after a week of guarding in the rain, the soldiers already become friends. In war, the joint work also creates personal ties, friends even.
נוצרות גם חברויות, צחוקים אחד עם השני, וכל אחד כבר יודע איזה קפה הוא לא שותה, ואיזה משמרות הוא לא אוהב.
יש צחוקים עם הצד השני, יש כאילו...
קודם כל, פסח זה אירוע מעניין לשותף אמריקאי, הוא מגלה שאסור לו לאכול יותר חמץ, זה לא משהו שקל לאמריקאי לעשות. אפילו יצא לראות שותף אוכל גפילטה פיש, שהביא אחד המילואימניקים שלנו, הכין בבית.
יצא לי לארח קצת לפני המערכה, לפני שנפתחה המלחמה, את אחד מהקצינים האלה לארוחת ערב אצלי בבית, וישבנו סביב ארוחת שולחן השבת, ואמרנו קידוש, ובסוף הערב הוא ניגש אליי ואומר לי, בשביל זה אנחנו עושים את זה, כדי שדברים כאלה ימשיכו לקרות פה במדינת ישראל, וזה גרם לי להבין כמה חזק הקשר הזה, כמה זה מדהים שהם פה ואיתנו, ולמה הם מתכוונים.
לי חוזר סיפור על אחד מהשותפים שיושב איתנו כבר חודש במעבה האדמה. לומד שם עברית, ככה זה. עכשיו, ממי הוא לומד עברית? מחבר'ה צעירים, מהאנשים שסביבו, אנשים חדורי מוטיבציה, מורלים, מקצועיים, תותחים, אנשים נפלאים יש לנו. ילדים, עדיין ילדים.
They also probably didn't believe that the joint campaign would look like this. Shoulder to shoulder, wing to wing sometimes. And for them, this is only the beginning.
איך אתה מרגיש אחרי חודש כזה?
אז אחד, אני מעריך שהפנים שלי מעורפלות, אבל אני מקווה שאתה יכול לראות בעיניים שלי את הבוהק שיש. אנחנו מסורים לזה בצורה הכי אישית שאני יכול להגיד לך. אני מרגיש גאווה עצומה, ולכן אם אתה שואל אותי, אני קם כל בוקר עם חיוך, עם כל הקושי. אני חושב שהאפקטיביות המבצעית שיוצאת מזה בקצה, היא תהיה משהו שבאמת יאפשר לנו לשמר ביטחון לטווח הארוך.
Pretty fascinating. All right, that is it for now from the I-24 News Desk. Thank you for joining us. Make sure to stick with us because we're going to be back live on air again at 8 p.m. Israel time with the latest updates across the region. I'm Natasha Kirchuk. This is I-24 News, and we'll see you shortly.